The words sliced through me sharper than the December wind outside. We'd prefer if you left. Amanda's voice, smooth and cold, floated over the clinking glasses and polished laughter of the Christmas party. Her sequined gown sparkled beneath the chandelier, but her eyes burned with disdain as they scanned my wrinkled dress, my damp hair, my hands still marked with dirt from helping a stranger on the roadside. 30 minutes late, I had walked into my son's in-laws' mansion, expecting warmth, perhaps even acceptance. Instead, I found contempt staring me down in front of 100 watchful eyes. At 64 years old, I thought I had outgrown humiliation. I was wrong. But let me step back and tell you how I, Margaret Sullivan, ended up being shamed at the grandest Christmas party in Greenwich, Connecticut, only to discover that the people you least expect can change your entire life. 3 months earlier, my days had been quiet and predictable. I lived alone in a modest apartment, my pension just enough to keep the lights on. My husband, Frank, had passed 5 years before leaving me. Memories and a stack of bills, but also lessons about grit, humility, and kindness. I clipped coupons, sewed my own clothes, and stretched every dollar. Yet, despite the struggles, I never felt poor in spirit, at least until I compared myself to my son's new world. David, my only child, had married into a family that embodied Connecticut's old money elite. His wife, Amanda, was the type of woman who never left the house without flawless hair and a designer handbag. From the first moment she stepped into my home years earlier, I knew she'd already made up her mind about me. She glanced around my secondhand furniture, forced a smile, and said, "It's very cozy," in a tone that suggested cozy was the ugliest word she could imagine. I tried to win her over with warmth and cooking, but nothing changed the fact that in her eyes, I was simply David's poor mother. Amanda's family, the Whitmans, were practically Connecticut royalty. They had country club memberships, family businesses, vacation estates, and a habit of making outsiders feel small. Patricia, Amanda's mother, introduced me at their gatherings, not by name but as David's mother from New Haven. That was all I was, an address, an obligation. And Amanda's grandmother, Eleanor, though quieter, was painted by Amanda as an elegant relic of another era, more a symbol than a participant. So when David called one crisp September evening, his voice unusually hesitant, I braced myself. "Mom, Amanda's family wants to meet you. Really meet you this time. They're inviting you to their annual Christmas party." He paused, careful, as though speaking to a child holding a fragile vase. "They specifically asked me to invite you." I should have been thrilled, yet my chest tightened with suspicion. Amanda had ignored me for 3 years. Why the sudden change? David offered a hint. Amanda's been talking to her grandmother about family, about including everyone. Just maybe dress nicely, you know how they are about appearances. I knew exactly how they were about appearances, and yet I said yes. Because deep down, I wanted what every mother wants, a place in her son's new life. The weeks leading up to the party became a project. I scoured discount racks, searching for a dress that looked like it belonged in marble halls. After 2 days, a patient saleswoman helped me choose a burgundy gown marked down from $200 to $65. I found shoes that pinched my toes and a purse that matched, then practiced conversations in my bathroom mirror at night. What to say about my work history, how to answer about my apartment without embarrassment, how to smile when I didn't understand a reference to European resorts. I rehearsed dignity like it was a performance. David, always protective, called twice with reminders. "Mom, avoid politics. Don't get too personal. Keep things light." Amanda's stressed, she just wants this to go smoothly. Translation: don't embarrass us. I swallowed the sting and promised to behave. The night before the party, I laid out my dress like armor and set my alarm for 8:00 a.m. Hair appointment at 10:00 a.m. Dress fitting at noon arrival, fashionably late at 2:15 p.m. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to dream that, Maybe Amanda's family might finally see me as more than an inconvenience. But Connecticut winters have a way of laughing at human plans. I woke that morning to an ice storm rattling my windows, the sky a curtain of sleet. The salon canceled no power. The alteration shop was flooded. By noon, I sat in my robe, staring out at frozen streets, wondering if the party would even happen. At 12:30 p.m., David called. "Mom, are you still coming? Roads are bad." I heard Amanda's voice in the background. "Tell her the party's still on. Everyone's already here. Everyone except me." I refused to let the storm defeat me. I did my own hair, dabbed on lipstick with trembling hands, zipped the burgundy dress, and wrapped myself in my one practical winter coat. At 1:30 p.m., I set off carefully along the icy roads, determined to arrive, determined to be part of the family. But life has a way of testing us when we least expect it, and mine appeared in the form of an elderly woman stranded beside her luxury sedan, silver hair glittering with ice dignity, intact despite the storm. I could have kept driving. I should have kept driving. Instead, I pulled over, rolled down my window, and asked, "Do you need help?" She turned her head, and I saw a face both delicate and strong, etched with age, but unmistakably refined. Her coat was elegant, her scarf cashmere, but she was shivering as she tried to wave down a car that didn't stop. "My tire's gone flat," she said, her voice trembling but steady. The service line said it could be hours. I looked at the time, already past 2. My stomach knotted. Every minute I stood there meant more side eyes and whispers when I finally arrived. But leaving her alone on the icy roadside wasn't an option. "Let me help," I said. I'd changed tires in worse conditions. Kneeling on the frozen pavement, my burgundy dress soaking through, I loosened lug nuts and jacked up her car while sleet soaked my hair. The woman protested at first, but soon wrapped her scarf around my neck. "At least keep warm," she insisted, her hands shaking. By the time I finished, my palms were raw, my knees numb, and my coat streaked with dirt. She pressed her hand to mine. "Thank you, dear." I don't know many who would stop. "It's nothing," I said, though. My chest swelled at her gratitude. She asked my name. When I told her, she smiled faintly. "Margaret. A good name. You remind me of someone I once knew, kind when kindness was rare." I didn't realize until she drove away how late I was. My hand shook as I texted David. "Running late. On my way." His reply was immediate. "Hurry. Everyone's waiting." By the time I reached the Whitman's mansion, the drive was a parade of black sedans and valets in crisp uniforms. Lights blazed through tall windows. Music floated out, and inside I glimpsed clusters of perfectly dressed guests holding champagne flutes. I parked my old Toyota far from the valet line and walked up the icy steps, coat damp, hair frizzed, shoes pinching. The butler opened the door. Warmth and perfume enveloped me, and then the silence. 100 eyes turned at once. Amanda glided forward, sequins shimmering like icicles, her smile brittle. "You're late." Her gaze swept over my damp coat, the mud on my hem, the scarf that didn't match, and underdressed. Heat rushed to my face. There was a woman stranded. Amanda cut me off with a smile sharpened like glass. "How thoughtful. But we've already begun. I think perhaps it's best if you leave. We'll send David out." The room seemed to tilt. My son stood a few steps behind her, frozen. His eyes flickered between me and his wife. He opened his mouth and closed it. In that instant, my heart cracked. He wasn't going to stop her. I wanted to argue, to explain, to plead for dignity, but the words caught in my throat. Slowly, I turned and walked back toward the door. My shoes echoed across the marble like a funeral drum. The butler looked away as he opened it. Cold air rushed in, stinging my wet cheeks. I don't remember the drive home, only the blur of headlights and the ache in my chest. By the time I reached my apartment, I collapsed into a chair, staring at the burgundy gown crumpled around me. I had tried. I had hoped. And I had been dismissed, no longer just Amanda's poor mother, but now the embarrassment she cast out in front of her glittering world. That night's sleep wouldn't come. My mind replayed the scene on loop. Amanda's icy smile, David's silence, the laughter resuming behind me, as if I were nothing. I thought of Frank, of how he would have told me to hold my head high. I thought of the stranger I had helped on the roadside, and the scarf she had left draped around my neck. Somehow, that memory softened the sharpest edges of my shame. At least one person had looked at me and seen something worthy. 2 days later, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find the same elderly woman from the roadside standing tall, despite the winter chill. She wore a pearl brooch and a coat of understated elegance, her expression one of quiet command. "Mrs. Sullivan," she said warmly, "I came to thank you again. May I come in?" My apartment suddenly felt too small, too plain, but I ushered her inside. She looked around with calm eyes, taking in the worn furniture and the photos of David on the walls. "You helped me when no one else would stop," she said. "Do you know who I am?" I shook my head. She smiled faintly. "I am Eleanor Whitman, Amanda's grandmother." The room spun. My hands clutched the chair for balance. "Yes," she continued, her gaze steady. "I was at that party. I saw how my granddaughter treated you. I said nothing then, but I regret that silence, because you, Margaret, showed me more grace on the side of the road than I saw in that entire ballroom." I stared, words tangled in my throat. She reached into her purse, pulled out a folded paper, and placed it gently on the table. "I believe character reveals itself in the smallest acts. You revealed yours, and I intend to make sure the rest of my family understands who you are." I looked down at the paper confusion, swirling with hope, and in that moment, I realized my life was about to change in ways I could never have imagined. The paper on my table was thick, creamy, the kind of stationery that whispered money. But what struck me wasn't the embossed Whitman at the top, it was the handwritten note beneath. "Margaret Sullivan has shown me more kindness in one icy afternoon than most of us show in a lifetime. Character is not in possessions, but in actions. I want her by my side for what comes next." It was signed simply, Eleanor Whitman. I looked up, trembling. "I don't understand." Eleanor's eyes softened. "My dear, I'm not a woman who wastes words. My health is failing, and the Whitman family, they've forgotten what truly matters. They drown in appearances, money, and position. Amanda, Patricia, they believe status is everything. But you reminded me of a truth I feared lost. Dignity lies in how we treat others, not in what we own." I tried to protest. "I'm just an ordinary woman." She lifted a hand, silencing me. "You're not ordinary. You're honest. You're kind. And I need someone like you." She leaned forward, her pearl earrings catching the light. "I want you to help me with something very important, and in return I will make sure no one, especially Amanda, ever dares look down on you again." Her words unsettled me. I wasn't sure if this was kindness or a test. But something in her steady gaze, an echo of the dignity I once saw in Frank, told me she was sincere. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor and I grew close. She visited my apartment regularly, sometimes bringing pastries, sometimes just herself. She asked about Frank, about David's childhood, about the years I scraped and stretched to provide. And she listened, truly listened, in a way no one from her world ever had. One afternoon, she told me her plan. "I'm updating my estate. Patricia and Amanda expect to inherit everything. But I've decided to make a statement. I want you, Margaret, to be a trustee of the Whitman Foundation. Your judgment will guide how millions are used. And," she paused, a mischievous glint in her eye, "you will also inherit part of my personal estate." I nearly dropped my teacup. "Eleanor, I can't." "You can," she said firmly, "because money without conscience is poison, and I've seen your conscience." I wrestled with guilt, with disbelief, but Eleanor's determination never wavered. Slowly I accepted, not for myself, I told her, but for what it could mean for others. Then came the day of reckoning. Eleanor invited me back to the Whitman mansion, not for a party this time, but for a family meeting. When I walked into the grand room, Amanda's eyes widened, fury flashing across her perfect face. Patricia pursed her lips, already bracing for war. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, regale in her navy dress, her cane resting beside her. David was there too, shifting uncomfortably. "I have gathered you all," Eleanor began, "because changes must be made. I've seen enough of vanity of cruelty parading as sophistication. Margaret Sullivan will be joining the Whitman Foundation as a trustee. She will also inherit a portion of my personal assets, for she has shown the character this family sorely lacks." The silence was thunderous. Amanda broke first, her voice sharp. She's nothing. Eleanor's cane struck the floor, silencing her. "Enough. I will not hear such disrespect again. Margaret saved me when I was stranded. She lifted me, dirtied her gown, froze her hands all without expectation. And you," Amanda humiliated her at my party. "If anyone here is nothing, it is not her." My throat burned. Never in my life had anyone defended me so fiercely. Patricia sputtered. "Mother, this is madness. She doesn't belong. She belongs because I say she does." Eleanor cut in her tone final. David finally spoke, his voice low. "Mom, I'm sorry. I should have defended you." His eyes shone with guilt, but also with something else, pride. For the first time in years, I saw my son not torn between two worlds, but choosing me. Amanda stormed out her heels, stabbing the marble. Patricia followed, muttering. But Eleanor simply leaned back, satisfied. Later, when the meeting ended, Eleanor squeezed my hand. "Let them stew. You've already won. Not because of money, not because of position, but because you never stopped being yourself." And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I thought I had lost. Not wealth, not status. Something deeper. Respect. The weeks after that meeting felt surreal. One moment, I was the invisible mother-in-law pushed to the margins. The next, I was seated beside Eleanor Whitman at foundation luncheons. My name printed on programs, people asking for my opinion. I didn't suddenly become wealthy in spirit because of money. It was because for the first time people looked at me and actually saw me. Amanda avoided me for weeks, her pride a fortress. She refused to lower. Patricia remained frosty, speaking in clipped sentences whenever we crossed paths. But David began visiting again alone sometimes with my grandson, little Andrew. He confessed one night, over a cup of tea at my kitchen table, "Mom, I was scared. Scared Amanda would leave me if I stood up to her. Scared you'd be embarrassed by me if I stayed quiet. I should have had more courage." I touched his hand. Courage isn't about never failing, David. It's about finding the strength to do better when life gives you another chance. And slowly we began repairing what had been fractured. Eleanor, meanwhile, became almost like a second mother to me. She insisted I sit by her side at family dinners, even when Amanda's smile strained like glass. When reporters asked why she'd chosen me, she answered simply, "Because kindness must be preserved in this family. Margaret is proof of it." The day her estate plan was finalized, she gave me a small velvet box. Inside was a brooch, an heirloom of diamonds, shaped like a star. "For when you doubt your place," she said softly, "wear it, and remember you earned it, not by birth, not by wealth, but by who you are." Tears blurred my vision. I thought of the night at the party when I had been told to leave. Now I was being asked to stay. When Eleanor passed peacefully in her sleep the following spring, grief swept through the mansion, but alongside the sorrow came a storm of whispers, lawyers, and board meetings. Patricia and Amanda expected to step into the spotlight. Instead, Eleanor's will revealed her final gift. She had left me not just a trustee's seat, but also a portion of her personal estate. A modest sum compared to Whitman standards, but life-changing for me. Enough to pay off debts, secure my future, and even set up a college fund for Andrew. Amanda nearly fainted when the announcement was read. Patricia tried to contest it, but the document was airtight. And through it all, I remained calm, hearing Eleanor's voice in my memory. "Hold your head high, Margaret. They cannot diminish what you've already proven." Months later, I stood in my modest apartment, now freshly painted, newly furnished, not with extravagance, but with comfort. On the wall hung photos Frank in his uniform, David at his wedding, Andrew with a grin missing 2 front teeth, and beside them a framed copy of Eleanor's handwritten note, the one she'd left on my table that first day. On Thanksgiving, David came with Amanda and Andrew. For the first time, Amanda greeted me without ice in her voice. She wasn't warm, not yet, but she extended a hand and said, "Margaret." That was all. But it was enough to show the walls were cracking. That evening, as we sat around the table, Andrew tugged at my sleeve. "Grandma, tell me the story again, about how you changed a tire in the snow." I smiled, glancing at Amanda, who looked away embarrassed. "It wasn't much of a story," I said softly, "just a moment when someone needed help." But I knew better. That moment had rewritten my entire life. Because here's the truth. I went to that Christmas party hoping for acceptance, and I left with humiliation. Yet it was in humiliation that grace found me in the form of a woman, stranded on the roadside, who turned out to be the one person powerful enough to show me I already had everything I needed: respect, dignity, kindness. And when I looked around the table that night, laughter echoing, candles flickering, Amanda watching me with wary curiosity, while David smiled with pride, I realized something else. Eleanor had given me more than an inheritance. She had given me back my place, not in the Whitmans' world, not in their marble halls or glittering parties, but in the heart of my own family. And that was worth more than all the diamonds in her vault. Thank you for listening. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had to rebuild yourself after betrayal? Share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.